Hello and welcome to another Marty's Matchbox Makeovers. Today is an exciting day, for I am trialling a new drone pickup and delivery service for donor models. So here is the first one that has arrived from the USA. It is a number 74b Daimler bus, which was made in 1966, and this one has been generously donated by Kevin and Kasey McMullen from Mason, Ohio. They tell me they paid 50 cents for this at a local market. So I'm now checking it out to see what I have to do. Obviously it needs new stickers, a new paint job, and there's also some window frame elements missing. There's a rivet up the back there, which is quite awkward to get to. So I'm deciding I'm going to drill through the base plate to get to it. So I'll do that now. First off, I'm using a spring-loaded center punch so that my drill doesn't wander. First, I'm using a small drill to make a pilot hole, and then a larger drill to drill the rivet out. It makes rather a large hole in the model, but I'm confident that I can repair it with some filler later. There's nothing to gain purchase when trying to separate this model, so I'm going to try and jack it apart using a small nut and a bolt. So I'll put the bolt through the hole I've made, and using this small nut that's super glued to this tiny little spanner, I'm now going to screw the bolt up, which in theory should push the top section of the model off of the bottom. And there we go. Well, that wasn't too difficult. Now I just remove the bolt and I can get on with things. The seats fell out quite easily. I'm going to have to give them a clean. As you can see, they are filthy from 50 years of play. I'm just going to use some warm water and some washing up liquid to give these a clean. I'm amazed at how well these are made. They match perfectly together. Just a normal paintbrush here to agitate the dirt off them. They came up quite clean. Very well detailed model, this. Now before I paint strip this, I'm going to try and make some paint to match the original colour. So I'm using this Mr. Hobby paint. It's water-based enamel. And I'm using a radome, it's called, and a white. And I'm going to mix them together to try and make this creamy colour. And I shall thin it with these thinners so I can spray it through my airbrush. These models, by the way, if they're in pristine condition, they can fetch between 75 and 20 Australian dollars on the internet. So this one for 50 cents was quite the bargain. To mix the paint, I begin with the tan colour and then I add drops of white in ever increasing amounts until I get the light tan colour that I'm looking for. So here I am putting it onto the model, and you can see that this is very, very close to the original paint. I'm happy with that. Now I shall remove the wheels in spectacular fashion. I didn't see that coming. I shall be finding those later. Now my favourite part, the paint stripping. I'm using my old favourite, and this time I'm wearing a rubber glove. Always important to look after your hands when you're using paints and thinners and paint strippers, etc. So that was the body, and now that's the base. My wife is out shopping with her mother today, so once again I've quickly borrowed her toothbrush to remove the paint from the model. I'll put it back before she gets home. Now, having used emery paper, steel wool, cotton buds, little chisels and toothpicks, I've removed all the little scraps of paint, and this is what I'm left with. The raw casting, ready for painting. Just looking at some of the details on here. Not a whole lot, but some, nonetheless. I have seen better, but then again I've seen a lot worse. I've just noticed that this step where you get on is actually broken away from the frame too. Something I wasn't aware of before. I've just put a little bit of masking tape on there to prevent me from damaging the front grille with these pliers. What I'm doing is I'm flexing the front of the bus, so hopefully when it's at rest, the gap where it's broken will be closed. I've also got to turn it inwards a little bit. Then I'm going to use some of this JB weld to fix it in position. It's a two-part epoxy product which is reinforced with metal filings, I'm led to believe. This was recommended by my subscribers, so I'm giving it a go. For the window support replacements, I'm using a small split pin, or I think they may be called cotter pins in other parts of the world. They're ideally suited because they have one flat side and one curved side. So when they're installed with the flat side on the inside, they look almost original. It is a bit fiddly filing them to size, but when you get there, the finished product is quite worth the effort. Again, I'm using the JB Weld product to glue these uprights into position. The thing with this stuff is it takes like 24 hours to set. And I'm in a bit of a rush today. I want to get this video out for my fans. So I cheat a little bit and I take a shortcut and use my super glue and baking powder recipe just to speed things up a little bit, and it will reinforce these struts on the inside of the model. There, I just need to give them a little bit of a sand when they're set, and it looks as good as new. Now it's ready for undercoating. Before I undercoat it, I'm putting a spool of solder on the roof to clamp the gap shut whilst the JB Weld sets. I've got to make some decals for this, so I'm using my computer and a program called Paint Shop Pro. Here is my first attempt. I've used an image on the internet for inspiration. So I'm now printing it out to see if I've got the dimensions correct. Looks a little bit big to me, so back to the drawing board. Okay, again I bring up a picture, and I use this in conjunction with the model as reference to find out the exact size of this decal. Here I'm using some digital vernier calipers. I now set the exact size here in PaintShop Pro as an option, and I print it off at 100%. Let's see how that works. Perfect. All I got to do now is do a test fit just to ensure that it's the right dimensions, and then I print it out on some white backed decal paper to make my own transfers. Here I'm cutting the transfers roughly to size with my guillotine, and to set the ink I use Tamiya clear coat to spray over the top of the decals. It's very important you do this, otherwise when you put them in water the ink could run and ruin the decal for you. Whilst that's setting, I am now filling the hole I drilled in the back of the model and sanding it down so it doesn't look like it's been touched. The JB weld has cured, and I'm just using a very tiny hobby file just to smarten up the edges of the struts and the doorstep. And going that one step further, I'm just going to put a tiny amount of filler in to blend it in so you can't see that there was ever a crack there. I'm doing the same for the window pillars. Now to give it an undercoat of the Tamiya Fine Surface Primer. This is a great product as it does not obscure any of the very fine casting details in these models. Now to paint the colour using the colour that I made previously. I must say the Mr. Hobby paint goes on really well, and it actually does not need a top coat to make it look high gloss. The wheels were a little bit shabby, so I'm just making a light wash with some Tamiya black gloss and some thinners, and I'm working on greaseproof paper so that the wheels don't stick to the paper when they're drying. I do one side and then the other, and when I reassemble it I pick the best side to face outwards. Here's the original axles that I removed earlier. I'm now giving them a clean with some very fine emery paper to make them look like new. I do one end in the drill truck and the other end by hand. Now here's all the parts to put back together. I'm using my drill press method to reform the end of the axles, details of which can be found in my other videos. Sweet! With that done, it's time to put the model back together. When it's back together, I will place the decals on the model, and that will be the model finished. I cannot reform the rivet that was drilled out, so to assemble this model and make it durable, I'm using some epoxy resin, araldite, 2-part resin, to glue the base onto the upper body. Now to test out my homemade transfers. I just moisten the side of the bus so that when the decal is in position I can slide it around if necessary. Now using tweezers I just drag the backing sheet away from the top of the decal, from the top layer of the decal, and smooth it over with some cotton buds and tissue paper. So here's what I started with. As you can see, shabby looking paint, missing window elements. And this is what it looks like now. Brand new coat of paint, repaired windscreen, and new decals. And look at those tyres shine. Now this bus can be put back into service and transport all those tourists that come to London and want to see Buckingham Palace, Big Ben and the Houses of Parliament. Well, thank you to Kevin and Kasey. I'm now going to mail this back to you. I'm going to be using my drone system, so I just take this barcode reading and that has all their details, GPS position and address. So away she goes. Thanks for watching. Please like and share, and I will see you next time. Motherfucker. Holy crap. Look at that piece of shit.